Welcome to Talks with Tracy, with certified hypnotherapist, life coach, and licensed mental health professional, Tracy Claremont. Tracy will share her healing journey and explore the many meaningful alternative healing methods in our world today that will support you in doing your own deepest emotional healing. So please welcome the host of Talks with Tracy, Tracy Claremont. Let the suffering end and the healing begin.
Hello and welcome to Talks with Tracy. I am your host, Tracy Claremont, coming to you live on the Bold Brave Television Network. Thank you so much for joining me today. I always appreciate everyone who takes the time to listen to the show. And thank you, Bold Brave Television Network, for having me. I appreciate you as well. Today, I am doing a part 2 with the beautiful and amazing Ash Benavides. She is our resident expert on narcissistic abuse. She gave us an update last week of her life. You know, she was sharing how the universe continues to send her tests of her learning and of her healing from narcissistic relationships. If you haven't seen that already, I encourage you to do so. That was Talks with Tracy number 55. So I have titled today's episode, I Am Not to Blame, and I put a whole bunch of exclamation marks after that. So before we bring Ash on, I just want to kind of lay a little groundwork for where my brain has been lately. I've been reading the book, What Happened to Me, which is a collaborative effort on the part of Oprah Winfrey, my hero, and the amazing Dr. Bruce Perry. It talks about the deep-rooted effects of childhood trauma, and it provides some touching stories to illustrate the scientific evidence of how childhood trauma impacts us in our lives. Now, when I'm reading this, I am struck once again by just the fact that the majority of people walk through their lives and in our worlds blaming themselves for trauma that they've experienced in their childhood, blaming themselves for behavior patterns and core beliefs that develop as a result of childhood trauma. You know, this is where I'm not good enough, feelings of failure, feeling like you're not worthy of love, difficulty regulating emotion, all of these things come from, and these experiences color our perceptions and create our reality, because our thoughts create our reality. So all of this without knowing that it's even happening. Now, I don't know why I'm so struck by this, because I've used myself as an example many times on this show, and I myself have talked about how I was a mental health therapist helping people make these connections on the daily, but not making my own connections, you know, not taking the time to say, gee, Tracy, why are you so full of anxiety? And why do you have these people-pleasing behaviors? And why are you unhappy? I never stopped and looked at myself until a crisis happened and I was kind of forced to. So I don't know why it surprises me. Anyway, I want to give an example of how we blame ourselves for our childhood trauma experiences. My husband and I, we were watching an episode of 2020 the other day, and I was interested in it because they were solving cold case files and cold cases using DNA genealogy technology. I don't know if that's what it's called. I'm sure it has a better name than that, but that's what I call it. Basically, where they take DNA from a crime scene and then they track it back through through a genealogy chart until they land on a suspect, and then they go DNA test that person, and they solve cold cases. Anyway, so I was listening to this case where a 19-year-old woman was brutally murdered in her home, while her 9-month-old baby was in the crib in the next room. Now, this is a cold case, so this 9-month-old baby is now a 30-some-year-old woman. She was being interviewed on the show, and having your mother murdered in the next room certainly qualifies as childhood trauma. So as I was listening to her interview, I heard her say that she has always blamed herself for her mother's murder, because if she had not been there as a baby, her mother would have ran out of the house and possibly escaped. instead of staying in the house to protect her baby. So I'm listening to this with my husband, and I'm like, what? Did you just hear her? Oh my gosh, this woman just took responsibility for the murder of her mother when she was just a baby. That's kind of what it's like to watch TV with me. But anyway, I mean, there could not have been a more innocent situation for, I mean, this is a child completely incapable of causing a murder. Yet she has had, still, even in this interview, was holding herself responsible for her mother's murder. Now, they did find the murderer, by the way. He was this man living in a nice house with a nice family, a business owner, a churchgoer, who just happened to have committed a horrific murder several years back. Scary. Anyway, so just imagine the child who's yelled at, called names, told they are the problem, or the child who's completely ignored and neglected, left alone. Maybe that's some of you out there. Just imagine how easy it is to take on responsibility and develop those core beliefs that will follow you through your life. Anyway, so I know Ash Benavides' story somewhat about her childhood. And let me tell you, she is a true living example of first being blamed by others for her behaviors related to childhood trauma, and which is super common when you have a narcissistic parent, right? Because they are just doing their best to parent you, and it's, these awful children who are to blame. So that's the experience of being raised by a narcissistic parent. They're never accountable for anything. And she's also a perfect example of childhood trauma impacted behaviors and relationships and beliefs that followed her into her adult life. So Ash has graciously agreed to be with me once again today to share her experience. It wasn't until she did that deep dive inward into her emotional experience and really started looking at all this and doing the healing that she even developed any awareness of how this impacted her life. So I can't wait to have this discussion. So please join me in welcoming the amazing and beautiful Ash Benavides back to the show. Hi.
Hello.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
I am good, thank you. So, Ash, you heard my introduction, and my brain just gets busy putting all of this stuff together. And when I think of childhood trauma, very often it comes at the hands of narcissistic parenting. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and that has been your experience with your father. And um, I don't remember, was it also with your mother, or was she less of an issue because she was not there, or?
She wasn't in the picture. It was my dad and I had a stepmother.
Oh, okay. All right. So I love hearing your story because I know you've described yourself as quite a feisty child who recognized early on that there was something not okay about your family. Like, this was not okay, which I would say is unusual because most kids, they grow up in the culture of their family, and they don't even recognize that that is not healthy or that is not normal because it's their normal, it's their life experience. But you're a different kind of example because you were like, what the heck, this is not okay. Is that is that correct? Can you describe that?
Yeah. So I guess early on, I just kind of, my dad, the whole family dynamic between my stepmom, my dad, my brothers, and then she had two kids that were much older. It just felt off. And I ran away actually 3 times. I was arrested every time because at the time they would charge you with runaway charges. Um, but my dad was very verbally abusive, manipulative, very controlling. Again, I didn't realize this till now because back then I would just be what they call the black sheep in a mesh narcissistic family. I was very rebellious, very, I'll do what I want when I want, to him directly. So a lot of the stuff that happened to me as a child, was just weird manipulative tactics. A lot of things were conditional. It was very much something I learned in life. Are people very unconditional or conditional? So my dad was very, if you do this, you get this. If you do as I say, he was very black and white. There was no room for error.
Right, and then there's heavy consequences if you don't do what a narcissistic parent is wanting you to do, right? Because again, that ignites their shame. It reflects poorly on them, and you become a problem child. Isn't that right?
Yes. Yeah, I had a lot of experience with, because I was removed from the home at an early age and left pretty young. It's difficult because my brothers stayed in it, and so I think their story is very different compared to mine. As far as being especially the black sheep, just knowing that the dynamics of our family was bizarre and uncomfortable. You couldn't so much as breathe a certain way without his permission. My dad would always say things like, what was his saying? Do as I say, always do as I say, not what I do, or something like that. Like, he had a lot of things with him that didn't line up. But I think the biggest hit for me was the constant putting me down, and then I love you, right? So we know that that's something narcissists do. They'll like degrade you, like chip away at your self-worth, and then a week later they love you and you're the most perfect person again. It's very confusing. So
yeah, that hot and cold, it's kind of like childhood trauma related to, like, sometimes a parent will like give you a spanking or something like that and say things like, this hurts me more than it hurts you, or I'm doing this because I love you. And how confusing is that? This doesn't, the child's like, this does not feel like love. This is,
right.
physical assault does not feel like love. But yeah, that
Right.
hot and cold. Yeah, you did mention that so as a result of that, you started to run away. And what age was that at?
About 12, 13 years of age, I ran away the first time. And this continued. I was picked up 3 times, and every time I was brought back, I'd run away again. I didn't stay for a day or two. I'd leave immediately. By the time I was like 14 years of age, I was awarded the state. Just because there was no way I was going back home. There was, and even now, looking back, understanding why I ran away at this age, when I look back years before, I'm like, I don't know why I ran away from home. I don't understand why I ran away from home. Now I look back, I'm like, oh, you ran away from home because you weren't, and again, and I've said before, it took like my experience for the young partner I had that I loved dearly and his enmeshment and his narcissistic family for me to wake up, because it was so uncomfortable. I didn't know what it was, but it was triggering ancient feelings from as a kid in this relationship. So then I learned about enmeshment. I just Googled traits. I was like, what is this? And I realized, oh God, that was my family, like to a T. And so yeah, I was awarded the state, put in group homes. Basically in those situations, I didn't follow orders. I didn't go see my probation officer. It was pretty traumatizing as well then, because I wasn't a criminal. I wasn't, I mean, you hear about young kids committing crime now. We have more media, so you hear about it more. There are absolutely young criminals when I was a young girl. But I was just a runaway. Basically it was like, she doesn't want to respect authority. That wasn't the case. I didn't want to respect abusive authority. And so it went from group home to treatment center to the last place before I turned 18 was actually 2 months in a girls' prison, which was shocking.
So yeah, you went to group homes. I would imagine typically with group home experiences, they require like therapy, or when you graduate from a group home to a therapeutic group home facility, there's different mental health diagnoses. There's often medication prescribed. Can you tell us, did you Was that your experience? Did you have different diagnoses assigned to you, and did they try to medicate you and do things like that?
Yeah, so in the beginning, this was before I was placed in a group home. I'll never forget, I saw a psychiatrist in Whitefish, and my dad had taken me. It was basically, the best way I could tell people is if you can't be controlled, you're going to be labeled with something. So in my case, I was labeled bipolar, which didn't make any sense because I was very steady Eddie rebellious, very like, this is not okay, yelling red flags. And at that time, the 90s, people didn't listen. So yes, at the time, they did prescribe me Depakote, which is, I think, ulcer medication. I'm not even sure what they're used for now, which I didn't take. I cheaped it. I never took it. But the places I was at, I spoke to one recently that is being investigated, and I absolutely can remember every event of that facility and the girls on medication. So, yeah.
So that's a facility that is now, today, being investigated for abuse. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, so now that's interesting in itself, because you're talking about having been a teenager at that facility, and maybe you could share some of the experiences that you then, because again, this is all like childhood trauma adding up. So we have the
Right.
abuse from your narcissistic dad, and then you have being out of the home, placed in facilities, going to doctors, being prescribed medication, being in a facility, a therapeutic facility that is now being investigated how many years later? Like 20 some years later?
20 years later, yes. Yeah.
20 years later, being investigated for abuse that you possibly witnessed. Did you witness abusive things in that facility?
Yeah, I actually did. My first day there, and keep in mind, because I was put in some of the in what I like to say Montana's very harsh facilities as a non-criminal background girl, it was very difficult for me. But I saw restraints, physical restraints, injections, constant. There was a padded room. I never got to experience the padded room, but one girl had broken glass and swallowed it all. And the staff in that facility, there was just no care. It was very monotone. 15 girls in the unit, ranging from all kinds of abuse or situations. They had a mechanical restraint machine, which was shocking, in their nurse's office, which was explained to me when I went down there that was for mechanical restraint. But yes, I did see some abusive. But in that time, when you're 15 years of age, you can either keep fighting it, which they're going to keep locking you up, right? Because you're the one crying wolf. So this is what I was doing. And in that time, when you were that person, they're going to just keep locking you up. It's your fault. You're the problem in this dynamic. You're not doing X, Y, and Z. And I would rebuttal, why should I do X, Y, and Z when this is not okay? So in a facility such as where I was at, you learn to just be quiet because no one's going to believe you. That's
it's like a survival strategy, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. So I am hopeful that things have gotten better over the years. However, I'm also not naive to the situation. I'm a mental health provider. I do know that all of these facilities like you're talking about have waiting lists to get into. Some of them, the exact same facilities that you were in, they've existed for a long time. Now, I'm not saying they're all abusive. Please don't take it as that. But these are experiences for children that cause trauma. They really are. I mean, can you imagine being a child, being in these facilities? And there is a trauma-informed care movement since you were going through these facilities that has shifted. I mentioned it earlier, has shifted that from what's wrong with you to what happened to you. But it sounds like there were not many people in your experience, your childhood experience, asking what happened to you. I mean, and then even how could you tell if your dad is the one bringing you to the psychiatrist? Like how can you even feel safe and free to tell what's happening to you?
Exactly. And at that time, up until even when I turned 18 years of age, the facilities and our networks aren't designed to listen to a child. What's going on at the home? I've heard now most times they like to assess the entire family. At that time, it was, I'm the problem, I don't fit in. Even in therapy sessions, it would be like, let's talk about your mother. And I remember being a young girl being like, why? She's not around. I don't even know her. How about we talk about my dad? But it was never accountability towards my father's behavior or the dynamics of my home, which in the end affected actually my brothers much more than it did me. And I'm grateful I got out because it was easier to cut that tie. But they were very one-sided. So it's kind of like how the courts are still. Hopefully things will change over time.
Right. And it caused you, correct me if I'm wrong, to kind of take on this persona as a rebellious person, or like, kind of like a badass or something like that, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a way to keep people away. If you keep people away, you're safe. Because you learn to not trust anyone. You don't know who to trust if that's your entire life up until you're 18 years of age. And it was just, I like to tell people when I do look back on it, the menace to society that I was, all I did was call these people out. Counselors, unqualified, I don't even know what you call them, the people that work at these facilities, group homes. They're not licensed to take care of at-risk youth. They don't understand. They come from a whole different world. And so for me, I was just a whistleblower. Well, whistleblowers tend to get in trouble. So.
Right. Right. And I do understand that in the course of all of this, um, there were also moments where you had a suicide attempt as well, just because all of it was so overwhelming. You just didn't want
Very much so.
to be there anymore. Right.
Yeah, so that was when I was in a group home.
Okay. Yeah, can you tell me a little bit about that?
So the suicide attempt was based, like my stepmom came to the group home to take me on an outing. I was 15. She said, your dad does not want you back. He's done raising kids. So I didn't feel like I had anywhere to go. I was on the highest level. I always completed my levels. And here I was like, okay, I can't go home. Where do I go? And, again, our society is if you do harm to yourself, you're going away again. So then I was pushed into another facility.
Right. So we could say that's a classic discard from a narcissist, right? I mean, you can't just choose to be done raising children when you have a child. That's not how it works.
Well, in that case, it was that. It didn't make him look good. So the key point for a narcissist is they got to look good at all times.
Right. And he probably came to the end of his, expressing that he was the victim in all of this and trying so hard to help you, and things not working. And maybe he just got tired of it and decided, you know what, I'm done. I'm going to discard my child.
Yeah.
So interesting that you point out that you were not a criminal. Your greatest crime was running away from an abusive family situation. And at the end of all of this, as you grew as a ward of the state, the last placement that you had was in a juvenile detention facility, which is juvenile jail, right? It's lockup.
Yes, I was actually sent to a girls' prison. So it's a facility in Montana that mimics an actual prison. And it was probably the most bizarre experience for me because I thought I was in there with, actual criminals. It was shocking, and I had nothing. So when everyone's kind of talking about their crimes, I'm like, I ran away from home. It was a bizarre situation, and I think looking back now, I think it was a tactic to break me of my whistleblowing ways. Like, you're going to do as we tell you to do. When we say jump, you're going to jump. You're not going to ask questions when which is a ploy of our society, right? We do things like you had said, I spank you because I love you. When we yell at children, just do as I say. There's no room for asking questions. There's no conversation. And our society is very geared for that. So that's the only thing I could take home from being sent to an actual prison for 2 months before I turned 18 was, here, let's give her a taste of what, and I'm like, but I have no criminal record. To date, I still don't have a criminal record. So it was pretty shocking.
Wow. So great example of how started with childhood abuse, certainly emotional abuse, morphed in, like snowballed as it went with you being the problem. I mean, a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, that's interesting in itself, right? I think there was a period of time, hopefully it's no longer, but maybe it is, where children were being diagnosed with bipolar all over the place, right? And I had a rule that I would not diagnose a child with a bipolar disorder. That, for me, that was something that would be further on in their development. But I remember working in the foster care system with children who were 7, 8 years old, diagnosed with a bipolar disorder. And I don't know how that is even ethical, because you really have to take into consideration their environments and their family dynamics, their emotional supports, all of that. What is causing the dysregulation, which is really what clinicians were look at when they diagnose a bipolar disorder. They're noting like erratic behavior, like ups and downs and ups and downs and ups and downs. Well, I don't know anybody who has raised a teenage. I don't know anybody who has raised a teenage child who hasn't experienced the ups and downs and the ups and downs and the quick mood changes and all of those things with their children. With my own teenage daughter, I'm reading her mood all the time to see if this is a good time to speak. She does not have a bipolar disorder. She does not have a mental health diagnosis. She is a teenage child. And these are normal developmental things. But I do think that bipolar disorder that you were diagnosed with has been in the past a catch-all for children who are blamed for behaviors that are the result of childhood abuse, childhood trauma. So, I mean, super interesting that all of this has just played itself out so much so. And I don't, there's part of me that wants to say maybe you're an extreme example, but then there's another part of me that knows that you're not an extreme example. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So, let's see. I would love for you to. Well, I think it's almost time to take a commercial break. So I would love to kind of stop here and go into, when we come back from the break, go into how all of this has played itself out in your adult life. You did mention that when you became partners had a partner who was part of an enmeshed family, it brought things to light for you. And
Yes.
and really talk about that, how all of this came to your awareness when we come back from the commercial break. And maybe we could go also into just how narcissistic our society is and how narcissism is so supported in our world today. So it is time to take a brief commercial break. We're going to do that. So please join us after the break for our ongoing discussion. You're watching Talks with Tracy on Bold Brave Television Network. We'll be right back.
What if there were a super tiny device that could diagnose the brain and is smaller than a single human hair? What if you could see inside the brain to help an epilepsy patient during surgery or to help the fight against Parkinson's disease? Dr. Patricia Broderick is proud to announce the Broderick Probe, a biomedical and electronic breakthrough. Imagine a probe to help with the understanding and potential cure of brain-related diseases. To learn more, listen live to the Easy Sense radio show with host Dr. Broderick, Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Bold Brave TV network. And to help support the Broderick Foundation, please go to easysense.com and learn how, with your help, we can fight these horrific brain disorders. That's easysense.com to learn more and help support the Broderick Foundation. Author, radio show host, and coach John M. Hawkins reveals strategies to help gain perspective, build confidence, find clarity, achieve goals. John M. Hawkins' new book, Coached to Greatness, Unlock Your Full Potential with Limitless Growth, published by iUniverse. Hawkins reveals strategies to help readers accomplish more. He believes the book can coach them to greatness. Hawkins says that the best athletes get to the top of their sport with the help of coaches, mentors, and others. He shares guidance that helps readers reflect on what motivates them, rediscover and assess their core values, philosophies, and competencies, find settings that allow them to be the most productive, and track their progress towards accomplishing goals. Listen to John Hawkins' My Strategy, Saturdays, 1 p.m. Eastern on the BBM Global Network and TuneIn Radio.
Welcome back to Talks with Tracy, coming to you live on Bold Brave Television Network. Thank you for joining us once again. I have the honor and privilege, as always, to be speaking to you, Ash Benavides. I just love you and think you're incredible. Thank you so much for being here. Before the break, you were sharing this, what I would see as kind of a snowball effect in your childhood, starting with being blamed essentially for behaviors that came as the result of your experience being raised by a narcissistic parent, like rebelling against it, but all related to the fact that you were experiencing childhood trauma through this abusive, strange, narcissistic, confusing relationship. So that snowballed all the way up until you were incarcerated for the last few months of your childhood, so to speak, when you were when you were turning right before you turned 18. So let's pick up from there, because I do understand that this situation and all these experiences did cause difficulties for you in your adult life as well, correct?
Yes, it did.
Yeah. So some of the classic behaviors that can come from childhood trauma and being raised by a narcissistic parent is, well, first off, our brains like what is familiar to us. So even though we may not consciously want to be in relationships with narcissistic people, we're subconsciously drawn to those kind of relationships because they are familiar with us, and we tend to have people-pleasing behaviors that narcissistic people prey on. Is that correct?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So you had mentioned people-pleasing behaviors in the past, and maybe some poor boundaries around relationships, with men. Can you talk about these, what you call situationships?
Oh God. Well, I mean, like, to be this old, like, I don't want to say old because I still feel young, but to be in this part of the journey and look back at my entire life and shake my head just in mortification. So it wasn't even just the men I dated. I feel like I didn't get into a lot of deep relationships with men, which is another probably sign of trauma. I would have very short stints. I did not get close to men. But the few that I did, they were my dad through and through. In a weird, twisted, bizarre way. I was also attracted to alcoholics. I was attracted to abusive, physically men. Basically men that were garbage, in which they come from their own trauma. But it's basically this cycle that you keep repetiting, like repeating over and over again. The same with friends. I was constantly the ear. Everybody, I used to describe my friends, I thought I was the trash can, because all my friends would come to me with their problems. And at the same time, I was also people pleasing. I'd loan out my trucks, my trailers. I'd let you stay at my house. I was constantly in this sort of reality without even realizing, why are you giving so much to people for no reason? And it was that pleasing them and wanting to see, if they were okay and make sure they were okay. Over the top. As far as the men went, it was, a couple were very grandiose, and some were very, very difficult to understand if there was narcissistic behavior or sociopathic behavior. They're very, I tell people one of the greatest gifts you can do is learn to read the room. And I mean literally learn to read the room. And that's another trauma response, but I've really amplified it because I have to after my accidents. But yes, these men were they would give me the bare minimum. And I took it. I took it like breadcrumbs. I didn't learn all this stuff till 3 years ago, what gaslighting was. I didn't even know what a narcissist was. But it was a best friend of mine. I was complaining about my boyfriend. My longest relationship was 3.5 years. And she says, I think you're dating a narcissist. And I said, what is that? And then it was like Pandora's box was opened up. I mean, you can't get enough of the information on these people. And he fit the bill. He kept abandoning me for no reason. And that was another issue I had because my birth mom left when I was very little. So as a 5-year-old, I'm carrying abandonment issues. And we basically just snowball effect trauma. And yes, it affected my adult life with, again, looking back, I've really narrowed my circle of quote-unquote friends to a very small amount. And I look at the people I was associated with, and I'm like, oh, my God. Like, these people they got their own trauma, chaos, they're either narcissistic. I literally spent my life with toxic people. And now looking at that, and I've seen a couple of them. Definitely seen a couple of these people, and I'm like, I can't even believe I hung out with these people. Because you don't see it until you see it. And that's when you take your power back. It's like, oh, I went through this. Like, it was the aha moment 1.5 years ago. Oh, I come from an enmeshed narcissistic family. This is why Jacob's family drove me nuts. Because I didn't understand what it was until the knowledge was given to me. So it was a mess. My life's been a mess.
Right. And, we also, first off, I want to say good for you for doing all the healing, though. So, yes, these things have been messy, but so much learning has come from it, and you've made such great changes in your life. So I want to say that before I go on. But when you were with your one partner and you were sensing and feeling the yuckiness from his enmeshed family, we hold memories of our trauma in our bodies, right? Especially when we have repeated experiences, which is very safe to say you had in your childhood in regard to trauma experiences, then it finds a place in our bodies. So when we come across it again, like you were in this relationship and you're seeing this family, it's not only your mind that's saying what's going on, it's your body that is like physically reacting to the yuckiness of it. It's a familiar feeling that you uh, did your best to escape from. Is that is that right? Like, could you just feel it?
Oh yeah. I always felt like this gut wrenching sort of,
Mm.
the best way to describe it was like my heart was racing and I was constantly not wanting to be around these people. Now, you got to ask yourself that if you're in a group of people and you feel uncomfortable, check in with yourself. Why are you uncomfortable? Is it the room? Is it you? And it was. I mean, in the end of the day, the relationship ended because of the family. The family gave them the ultimatum. I mean, there's other things that went on, but enmeshment is no boundaries with siblings, parents, and whatnot. So it wasn't just dating this fella. I was dating his family. They would blow up my phone. It was constant, and I get overstimulated. So I remember one time when we left his family's house, I was just like, I can't do it. I don't know what it is, but I can't do this. I don't feel comfortable. I didn't know what it was.
Right. Would you say that was your intuition speaking to you and saying, like, alert, you're not safe, not
Yeah.
safe, not safe? So a lot of times when we get that feeling of not safe, when we have experienced trauma in our past, we we choose to not listen to that, and we
Correct.
start rationalizing, and maybe our abandonment issues come into play where we're like, but I can't lose this person, he's everything to me. Well, is he? Not if we really truly love ourselves. Then we know that we ourselves are everything. But when we're so caught up in patterns of looking externally for validation, then we also have a fear of losing people, so we hang on in healthy circumstances.
Correct.
Yeah.
That's exactly
So I
what
just,
happened, and that's exactly what I went through.
oh,
I didn't want to let go of the people.
oh, yeah. You didn't want to let go of people because of fear of abandonment, would you say? Or, uh,
I completely abandonment. It was definitely don't
oh,
leave me. I mean, I can honestly say that, and even the longest relationship I had that I did end, which was with a narcissist, there were moments where when he would do the leave, come back, leave, come back. Again, there was no fighting. This is what they do. This is another little tactic. And I got to a point after a year and a half, I'm like, please don't leave me. And looking back at that, I'm like, he left you once every 2 months, and would just pack up and leave you. And it was a game, because then he would show back up, like, do you miss me? Like, I should be with you. And I drank it down like Kool-Aid, and it was abuse. Because when they're repetitively abandoning you, that triggered abandonment issues from my mom, because my mom left, right? So this all resides in the brain, the subconscious part of the brain. Half the time, we're not even aware we're doing it. And it was the
right.
same with the young guy. Now, at this state of healing and doing that work and taking my own power back and taking accountability, I could care less. If you don't want to be in my life, great. Like, when you find contentment with who you are, it is shocking how much you're just like, wow, you know?
Absolutely. And I'm so thankful. That's what I mean. You've just done such great work to get to this place in your life where you can stand up for yourself, and you can see the signs and make choices about whether or not, like, who you want to be in your life. And you did mention that your circle is very small now, and that's okay. That I think that comes with releasing the need to be liked by everybody, because a lot of times when we're looking for
Yeah.
external validation, we feel like everybody needs to like us. I was listening to something the other day, and it was somebody who is famous. I can't even remember who it was now, but they were talking about fame, and how fame is about being liked. And what happens with a lot of people who become famous, they are looking for external validation, and they don't have the solid foundation within based on their own experiences to handle when people don't like them. And when you're famous and people are critical of you and not liking you, that's when the meltdowns occur. That's when all the dysregulation comes. That's when the problems come for famous people. But I thought that was really interesting how just the concept of fame being liked by everybody. And it made sense to me that people who look for external validation, they need to be liked by everybody. But when you're past that and you're like, you know what, I'm okay with people not liking me. If I'm not their cup of tea, then so be it. And your circle does become smaller, and that's okay because then it's often a much safer circle. Do you agree?
Oh, absolutely. 100%.
Hmm. And that comes from having healthy boundaries with people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you have to define, I always say draw the line in the sand. Wherever that is. I talk to a lot of people. It's like volunteer coaching, and it's very draining. I'm like, if you don't like something, draw a line in the sand. If you don't change something, then you accept it. You're accepting your life, however it is, whatever's going on with you. If you can't use the voice to say enough is enough, then you are allowing it to happen to your life. You're part of it, you know. Boundaries are crucial, however they look for every person.
Right. And I've had to come to a place where I've had to accept that in some way I agreed to being mistreated in my past. I had to agree to that on some level for it to happen, because had I not, it wouldn't have happened. I wouldn't have had those relationships. Now I understand. I forgive myself because it was all part of my learning, what I came here to learn, and I understand that. But that's a hard thing for people to accept, that in these ways we agree to having these experiences where we're mistreated.
Right. Which leads right into the narcissistic nation.
Okay, thank you. I was just going to lead you the same way. Talk to me about that.
So, narcissistic nation, if you kind of span back, and my hope is to write about it. Excuse me. We have a lot of traits that are conditioned early on as children for not only narcissistic people, but the dance between the narcissist, the empath, and you just nailed it. So one of the things that people across the board do not do is take accountability. You see it with children, you see it with adults, you see it with electorals, you see it with judges, you see it with police officers. Nobody wants to take accountability. Interesting. There's a lot of projecting and blaming installed in this country, right? Another thing, attention seeking. It is literally the ploy of the nation. TikTok, social media, everything you can think of is so overdone now. Look at me, look at me, look at me. I need validation, right? And if anybody questions that, or, there's a lot of people that do videos and people will make fun of them and they get offended. There's this dance, right? And I've noticed there's a lot of traits in our country that just say, oh, this must be because we are conditioned to be this way, right? The gaslighting, right? The state of confusion that people are left in. It's a very common trait in a lot of people. And, addicted to drama, right? We could talk about how narcissists have drama problems. Look at what we do. We have TV. It's not just 10 channels now. There's a billion channels with a billion reality shows with drama. It feeds the brain. We're not even realizing what we're feeding our brain, right? And so I say narcissistic nation is, I'm almost, as I step back and look, I'm like, wow, I'm seeing the same patterns over and over again in all these different shows, movies, people. I mean, I've watched a couple of movies that was just blunt narcissistic abuse. That's feeding the brain. So when I say narcissistic nation, I'm talking about the United States is a very narcissistic culture. Why? Because I think our country doesn't have a foundation of authentic culture. You go to other countries, India, South America, Mexico, they're very rooted in traditions, right? I'm not saying these countries are better, but they have traditions, and they also have laws. They don't allow a lot of the junk that the people of the U.S. get to see and have in their life into their world. They're very filtery. So I'm realizing more and more this is like a subconscious conditioning of the mind.
Right, a conditioning, that programming, right,
Yeah.
is what you're talking about, programming of our minds. I know that one of my teachers, and as far as spirituality goes, and developing my like psychic kind of abilities, she always says that, you know, if you're going to write something, if you're like if I'm going to write a show and um, develop content and things like that, she would say never have something going on in the background that has words in it. So don't have music playing that has songs with words in it. Don't have the television on in the background where even if you can barely hear it, don't have that, because all of these different things in our world that we encounter all the time, it's all programming and influencing us all the time. I can actually remember being a student at UC Berkeley and taking a social sciences class, and I was like 18 years old at the time. And this social science professor started giving example after example after example of all of the messages we're fed in all these different ways and how our minds are programmed. And I was devastated. I can remember calling my dad and be like, Dad, did you know that this is happening? This is so horrible. And he's like, yes, I did know that. And, and we had a big talk about it. But yeah, being programmed, conditioned all the time. So exactly what you're saying about narcissistic nation. So I look forward to a book like that from you too. I know that you're working on one book and you have another one in the works in your mind. So I can't wait to read those. Can you tell us, it's almost time to go, can you tell us how we might follow you on social media? I love your photography that you put on there and the writings that you have on your social media. How could we follow you?
The best place to follow me is on Instagram. I haven't been posting recently, but it's at Wild Spirit with the number 1 for the I.
All right. Yeah, like I said, I really love your posts. So I encourage everybody out there to follow you on Instagram. So Ash, thank you so much. I could literally just talk to you for days and days and days, and I actually do talk to you a lot, and I really appreciate our relationship that we have. So thank you for being here. I know that you're a little under the weather and whatnot. Thanks for hanging in there and being a trooper. I really appreciate you being here today. So thank you for that. And thank you to everybody out there who takes the time to listen to this show. I'm sending love to each and every one of you as well. If you'd like to check out my website, I would really appreciate it. It is tcholistichealing.com, and there you can find links to my YouTube and my social media and whatnot, and the services I provide. I'd love to meet you. So please do that. Also, there's on my YouTube, there's previous episodes of Talks with Tracy that can be accessed. So thank you for listening. Until next time, do a little self-care out there. I will do the same, and I'll see you soon.
This has been Talks with Tracy. Join us each week as Tracy and her guests will come together and realize that underneath it all, we are all the same and never alone. So join us each week and let Talks with Tracy be your safe place to land in your healing journey. Right here, Thursdays, 11